W790. Why you gotta be weird? And it is so dang weird, but we're gonna dive in. Okay, the most critical thing you gotta understand here is that there are 2000 series and 3000 series Xeons that fit in this socket. This big old socket right here. Is it horizontal or vertical? I think, but I'm not 100% positive, that portrait CPU orientation effectively designates this motherboard as designed for 2000 series CPUs. And a landscape orientation CPU socket, such as on the W790 other motherboards from ASUS, designated 3000 series Xeon CPU. CPU orientation for the same CPU socket as an indicator of things? That's gotta be weird. These two families of Xeon are similar, but they're different. 2000 series CPU supports 64-ish lanes, and DDR5 registered ECC is 4-channel, whereas the 3000 series have 128-ish PCIe lanes and 8 DDR5 memory channels. And that CPU orientation kind of tells you that, well, it just so happens. And there's overclockable Xeons in both the 2000 and 3000 series as well, which is the interesting bit. Overclockable? Yeah, but again, it's sort of a little bit bananas. We gotta dig in. Gee, that's weird. I mean, all this power, the overclocks, and everything else, this gives us a little bit of hope for interesting stuff. The 2000 series Xeons, what this motherboard is meant for, was meant to be the return of high-end desktop CPUs. And yet, there's not really a lot of coverage. They launched with a whimper last month. I mean, all this power on this motherboard, that does give us a lot of hope, doesn't it? I mean, PCIe Gen 5 and DDR5. The next clue for insanity is right here in plain sight. We have, some physical stuff we can look at. Right off the bat, we see that there's dual 8-pin CPU power, plus our 24-pin power. But wait, is that another 24-pin power, plus 2 additional 8-pin at the top? That's weird. This motherboard can dual-wield power supplies? Yeah, you bet. And what case you need for that? Well, the Lee & Dynamic 011 XL. Pull out some drive bays, mount a second power supply, you're good to go. Yeah, pop those North American breakers. Shut up, loser, we're computing pi. This is a CEB form factor motherboard. That's 12 inches by 10.5 inches or 30.5 centimeters by 26.67 centimeters. As motherboards go, that's actually not weird. The weird isn't always bad, but the motherboard runs a lot of, this motherboard it runs contrary to what you'd expect. Okay, CPU power delivery is a 12 plus 1 plus 1 power delivery, even with all of that. And I really didn't want to push the CPU past 1000 watts, but supplemental CPU power connectors and supplemental actually 24-pin connectors. Well, there is actually another 8-pin connector for more GPUs if you want to run more than one GPU. I highly recommend that 8-pin connector. And not only is it optional, you really only need a second power supply if you're going to overclock with the X series Xeons. And all the Xeons for this socket in the 2000 series support overclocking. Some of them do, 4 exactly. So yeah. Let's take a look at the memory slots on this. LGA 4677, 8 memory channels, right? Nope, 4 memory channels in this configuration. It has 8 memory slots, but it's 4 channels, so 2 DIMMs per channel. This is ideal for our 2000 series Xeons, and while ASUS has more than the 2000 series Xeons on their compatibility list for this motherboard, I would strongly encourage you to check out ASUS's compatibility list and only use CPUs explicitly on their compatibility list for this board, and understand that some CPUs that you might be able to plug into this motherboard, like if you plug a 3000 series CPU into this, you're not going to be able to use 8-channel memory or all your PCIe lanes. For rear I/O, we've got a 10 gig Marvell, a 2.5 gig Intel i225V, BIOS flashback, and CMOS reset. Great for enthusiasts. Update the BIOS without a CPU. We're using a single Type-C port at the back, which is a 2x2 10 gig connection, 20 gigabits total, and 4 10 gigabit Type-A ports. We also have 8 more USB 2.0 ports. Gee, that's weird. 8 USB 2 ports at the back? I mean, I have a lot of USB 2 peripherals. I mean, I'd rather have that than nothing, but that's a little weird. There's 5 audio jacks connected to our Realtek 1220A codec, plus an optical SPDI F out. There's also 2 onboard M.2, which are Gen 4. Gen 4? Yeah, Gen 4. That's a little weird in the PCIe 5 platform, isn't it? Maybe. I mean, the Gen 5 storage is not, it's kind of lackluster, so maybe that's not weird. But you do have 5 PCIe 5 X16 slots, full X16, supporting the full X16 lanes, except for the bottom 2, which can be X0, X16, or X8, X8. This is great because your GPU can hang off the bottom and not block any of the other 4 slots while being connected by 16 lanes. It does block the Q code readout though, which is maybe a little dumb, and then you can't use the slot above it that's not physically blocked, which is a little weird. Seems like a design oversight, but hey, it's not bad. And we have three different Slim SAS connections, which all do different things. The first one is a 4 PCIe 3 lane connection, so you can run PCIe 3. The second one is PCIe 4 or SATA, depending on which cabling you choose. And cabling can be a huge pain. And the bottom one is PCIe 3 or 4 only. There's no SATA capability. Again, if you're gonna run it at PCIe 4 speeds, you're gonna need a redriver and the appropriate connections. For the USB headers on this motherboard, you have two port USB 2 headers and a single 30-pin USB 5 gigabit header and a Type-C header that is capable of 2x 10 gig. 20 gig total. Now there does seem to be provisions for a Thunderbolt header, but I saw no documentation about actually being able to use that anywhere. We'll have to revisit that in a future build video. Also, on board is full IPMI remote control facilities, at least provisions for them, but to actually turn that on and take advantage of it, you're gonna have to use an add-in expansion card. Nothing really weird about any of that. PCIe card, maybe, but not bad. Now this motherboard uses registered error correcting DDR5. Unlike with DDR4, registered error correcting DDR5 is physically incompatible with regular normal DDR5. That's weird. And it's also available in overclockable formats. Yeah, it kind of launched with a whimper, but you can get overclockable error correcting registered DDR5. That's weird. But understand that this is really just a way to provide more voltage and frequency. It's a little bit more doable on the platform, and that's the weird part. It's not exactly an overclock. It's been tested for instability, but it's more of a beta testing new stuff in the DDR5 platform than really an overclock or really something out of specs. So that's a little weird when we're talking about having both error correction and overclocking capabilities, and it seems really kind of moronic on the surface, but then when you dig under the hood, it's, well, the JEDEC standards for error correcting registered DDR5 haven't caught up with the reality yet, and the reality is that memory vendors and motherboard makers are qualifying faster speeds than the JEDEC standard really supports, and so you're able to use that on this motherboard, which you definitely need to do if you are an enthusiast and this is a high-end desktop platform that you want to be able to overclock and do stuff with. It's a total of 7 4-pin fan headers, one of which is like the CPU combo, so you get a water pump CPU fan, so 6, 7, depending on how you count that, 7 that you can count on, so not bad. And the Thunderbolt header is so strange, they took the time to put a tiny little sticker over the silkscreen label on the circuit board. That's weird. And then you notice this little header at the bottom that looks kind of like it might be a Thunderbolt header. Well, it turns out it's not a Thunderbolt header, it's a VROC header. But ASUS put a sticker over it because probably VROC's not going to be a thing. Future versions of this board's probably not even going to populate that connector. I mean, it does only have 2 onboard M.2. It doesn't come with a card to give you more M.2. That's weird. So here's where it gets really weird. This is actually a pretty solid board and it delivers a lot of really cool stuff. But it doesn't outperform current generation Threadripper Pro. Let's take a look at our Xeon support table a little closer and our 2000 series Xeon CPUs. The Intel recommended MSRP pricing on these CPUs is really extremely aggressive. You can get a $350 CPU to light this platform and bring you DDR5 memory and storage. Now that's not an overclockable Xeon, it's just a low core count Xeon that'll get you to the platform. A 24-core CPU, on the other hand, is more Threadripper-esque, Threadripper light, if you will. And I would have bet that 4 channels of DDR5 would give an 8-channel Threadripper Pro on DDR4 a run for its money. But the reality is, it doesn't. The performance from this, and I suspect this is why Intel hasn't really seeded these or done anything with them, has not been super impressive in the 2400 series Xeons. But that's okay. If there's competing platforms and the performance is close and you've got some options, just keeping the platform alive is good. And so this is high-end desktop, and high-end desktop comes roaring back after X299 in a high-end socket. This is represents a little bit of a sea change from Intel. Think about it. We had the desktop processors in the past on the desktop chipset, and then we had X299, which was a slightly upgraded socket. It was a sort of a modern version of one of their older Xeon sockets, like the V3, V4, you know, Broadwell type Xeons. But at the same time, almost simultaneously, Intel launched their 3647 Xeon socket, which is 6 memory channels and everything else. Is that why Intel is a little gun shy about putting these systems into the hands of enthusiasts? It is a little weird. It's kind of a lot weird, actually. It's sort of different than Intel's past behavior. They're just sort of launching these into the channel. OEMs are going to buy these. There's a lot of people who would never consider an AMD system that will buy these just because of their own bias or anything else. The performance of the 2000 series Xeons really honestly isn't bad. I am surprised that it doesn't match older Threadripper systems, given how good the Golden Cove cores are that we see in Alder Lake and the slightly upgraded versions in Raptor Lake, even with an overclock on this platform. So I want to take a closer look at the 3000 series Xeons. I'm still trying to get my hands on some more parts and some more configurations to do more thorough testing of the 2000 series Xeons with error correcting register DDR5, but mostly this has been an OEM only event. You're going to have to buy a system from somebody. Okay, let's pick up a system from Falcon Northwest. That's going to be in the next video, so if you want to see that and get subscribed and do some fun stuff and sort of compare the horizontal versus the vertical socket, we'll do it. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1, I'm signing out. You can find me in the Level 1 forums.